Hello everyone, just wanted to go over our quiz from this week. Hope everyone had a good weekend. So our quiz questions, I have three of them that I'll go over. The first one was, what is the purpose of an institutional review board? And the answers were, and I apologize if the answers were confusing, hopefully they weren't, but the answers given were, we're conducting peer review of proposed research involving human beings, determine if the study was ethical, obtain informed consent from human subjects, all of the above, or all except C. So C was actually obtain informed consent from the human subjects, and that is, although an institutional review board or an IRB is very interested in the informed consent of human subjects, they aren't actually the ones that obtain it. The PI, principal investigator, or the person that's responsible for the study is typically the one that will obtain the informed consent, or the clinical research coordinator, or someone on behalf of the study will be the one that will obtain informed consent. For example, I was just involved in a study. I was the PI, principal investigator, on a study that involved firefighters. So when I worked with the firefighters, I would talk with them and then discuss the study and talk to them about what was involved in the study, the risks, benefits, all of that. So I was responsible for obtaining informed consent. In my case, they didn't actually have to sign a consent; they just had to give verbal consent. So the first two answers, conducting the peer review and determining if the study was ethical, those are the purpose of the review board, but they are not responsible for obtaining informed consent. That's the work of the actual folks that are doing the study. So the answer was all except C in this case. The next question was, stem cells are specialized cells capable of renewing themselves through cell division, sometimes after long periods of activity. And the answer to this was actually false. So stem cells are actually unspecialized cells. They're kind of um, a base, one of our base cells. I guess I don't know if I want to call it a base cell, but they're a cell that is an unspecialized cell, and they can they do renew themselves through cell division. And that's why they're so important for purposes of research and purposes of uh, you know. Uh, in healing, in disease healing, and in pathologies, in healing folks that have cancers and other types of disease pathologies, where we'll actually take a person. Unfortunately, I have a friend that's going through this right now who has this kind of rare disease. They did a stem cell transplant on him, where they did chemo on him to take him all the way down, kind of to the absolute, you know, bare level of um, of his immunities, and now they're building him back up with these stem cells. Um, so they, but he has his own. He obviously had his own stem cells transplanted into him. But what is so amazing about stem cells is that they do renew themselves through cell division, and so the answer in this case was false, because they're unspecialized cells, and sometimes they do this renewal through long periods of inactivity. So our stem cells will sit dormant, and they won't need to do anything until they are called upon to act. So they'll sit dormant, and then if they are then called upon to act, like in the case of a situation like in my friend, where he's having this procedure where they remove the stem cells. Then they did the chemo to take him down to that bare level of immunity, and then they are putting the stem cells back in to build him back up and hopefully overcome this kind of rare disease that he has. Will hopefully help him. So the answer was false, but unfortunately it was kind of a trick question. It was a few funky words in there that made that answer false. But the key is that they're not specialized cells. They're kind of one of our base cells that we have in our body. And it's after long periods of inactivity that all of a sudden they can become active and work through cell division. The last question that we'll talk about is, what is true about the Nuremberg Code? Nuremberg Code, if anyone, I happen to be very interested in research. I used to do a lot of research compliance, so and I love to do research now. So it's kind of come full circle. But the Nuremberg Code was one of the very important pieces of the puzzle that worked toward us as researchers now. We really, anytime that you may take part in a research project as a subject, or if you were to take part in a research project as an investigator, you need to be very cognizant of taking care of your participants. So the Nuremberg Code was really kind of the first piece of that, to make sure, obviously the Nazis in Germany, they were doing experiments on prisoners. They didn't really have much care for the human subject, and were doing these horrible experiments on prisoners. So the Nuremberg Code was formed secondary to that, developed shortly after World War II. So in this case, our answer was actually all of the above. So the guidelines were developed shortly after World War II. They were formed in direct response to experiments conducted in Germany on prisoners during World War II, and it was interesting because it actually did. And even though now today we still follow some of these very similar rules, there were 10 caveats of the Nuremberg Code, but it talked about voluntary informed consent, and talking to the patient about how the treatment was unlikely to be harmful. In today's rules, in the human subjects guidelines that we follow, that are secondary to another rule called the Belmont Report, and then some additional human subjects guidelines that have come out since then. But now we kind of call it risk versus benefit, because sometimes there are risks to you when you're involved in a study, but oftentimes the benefits will outweigh the risks. Take, for example, maybe a cancer patient that's involved in a clinical trial for a drug, but hopefully the risk that they may take in that clinical trial, maybe it's a fairly harsh chemotherapeutic drug that maybe is new to the market, but the risk that they take outweighs, or the benefit that they have, or potential benefit, outweighs the risk, because perhaps they've exhausted all of their regular options, and their other option is death. So they may try this chemotherapeutic. So sometimes it's risk versus benefit. It may be a risky option, but the benefit would be huge if it helps them. So our answer in this case was all the above. Voluntary informed consent. It was formed in direct response to experiments in Germany on prisoners, and it was shortly after World War II. So those are our top three. But if you have any other questions on any of the other quiz questions, please let me know. And I hope everyone has a fabulous week. We're on the downhill slide for sure. Only a couple weeks to go. Hopefully you've had a little bit of time to enjoy some summer as well as classes. So talk to you all on the boards. Thanks.